When U.S. Congresswoman Ilhan Omar publicly challenged Vice President Zohran Mamdani to a live TV debate, she didn't expect what followed. In a moment that stunned viewers nationwide, Mamdani calmly delivered one quiet, devastating line, and the entire room fell silent. Omar, visibly unsettled, struggled to recover. Within minutes, the internet exploded. It started with a scandal, not about corruption, but confrontation. Just 2 days earlier, Omar had been escorted out of a secure wing of the Capitol after attempting to confront Secretary of Homeland Security Kristi Noem. Cameras caught it all. "You are complicit," she shouted as agents gently but firmly removed her. The footage went viral. Embarrassed and defiant, Omar wanted to reclaim control of the narrative. She went on CNN the next morning and issued a direct challenge. "If Zohran Mamdani believes in true democratic socialism, then he should debate me face-to-face on policy, power, and what justice really means." It was bold. Critics called it reckless. Mamdani hadn't responded, yet. But in a quiet East Wing office, sipping tea, the vice president looked up from his notes and said to his team, "Schedule the debate." It was on, set for 8:05 p.m., aired live across CNN, MSNBC, and even Fox. America hadn't seen a showdown like this in years. Not between left and left, not between two faces of progressive politics with very different visions. The White House released a brief statement. Vice President Mamdani welcomes the opportunity to discuss the soul of our democracy. Behind the scenes, Mamdani was focused, measured. He pored over policy reports, past speeches, and legal files. But most of all, he studied something newly released by the DOJ, financial disclosures suggesting Omar's campaign had unknowingly accepted funds from donor fronts linked to foreign lobbying groups with interests in East Africa. Meanwhile, Omar practiced fire. "This man calls himself a radical, but he plays nice with the institutions that crush us," she told her aides. "I'll remind him what struggle really looks like." As night fell, bars, apartments, mosques, and bookstores filled with people watching. This wasn't a debate, this was a reckoning. The stage was minimalist. 2 chairs, 1 moderator, millions watching. Omar leaned in first. Her voice was steady, her words sharp. "Mr. Vice President," she began, "you claim to speak for the people, but you uphold a government that surveils them. You quote Fanon, but defend the people. Is that your idea of liberation?" A ripple of tension moved through the audience. Mamdani didn't flinch. "Are you finished?" he asked softly. Omar pressed forward. "You talk about justice, but you protect institutions that cage children and bomb civilians. You're a poet when it's safe, silent when it matters." Zohran exhaled. Then he said, "You speak of justice, but just days ago, your campaign was found to have accepted $3.9 million through shell organizations tied to international development firms operating in Somalia, while you were advocating legislation directly impacting those firms. That's not solidarity. That's a conflict of interest." The room froze. Omar's face stiffened. The moderator blinked. "Congresswoman, would you like to respond?" Omar's voice cracked slightly. "Those are distorted claims, taken out of context." She looked to the moderator. "This is distraction. We're here to talk about housing, healthcare, not smear campaigns." Mamdani simply opened a folder and slid a page forward. Calmly, he said, "This is your campaign's FEC filing from last quarter. Page 12, EML. 3 contributions from entities that don't appear on any registry in the US, Somalia, or the UN monitoring lists. So again, I ask, who paid you, Congresswoman?" Silence. The moderator whispered, "We'll be right back." The broadcast cut to commercial. Backstage, Omar stood, pacing. "This wasn't supposed to happen," she hissed. "He's not supposed to have that." Her staff remained silent. In the green room, Mamdani sat quietly, sipping tea, composed, waiting. In Minneapolis, Omar's own constituents began asking what else had been hidden. One tweet went viral. "I voted for Ilhan because I believed she stood alone against power. But now I just feel betrayed." Zohran Mamdani hadn't just won a debate, he had pulled back a curtain. and America couldn't stop looking. The moderator's next question was calm but pointed. Congresswoman, can you confirm that those donations were properly vetted? Omar didn't answer. She stared at her water bottle, lips trembling. Every second of silence weighed like iron. Deep down, she knew Mamdani wasn't bluffing. The vice president leaned forward slightly, voice still soft, like someone explaining grief to a child. The truth doesn't need shouting, he said. It just needs daylight. Omar finally spoke bitterly. I won't be lectured by someone who bows to party leadership when real resistance is inconvenient. No applause. This time no one cheered. Mamdani replied steady, You were the one who asked for this debate, Congresswoman. I showed up. I brought facts. You brought resentment. Omar's cheeks flushed. Her voice cracked. You don't know pressure, she snapped. You've never been hunted for your name, your scarf, your faith. Zohran paused. Then quietly, pressure is when your mother looks you in the eye and asks why you're protecting a system you once swore to dismantle. Silence. Not just in the studio, across the country. Viewers held their breath. Some wept. Backstage, Omar's staff watched in stunned quiet. Her chief aide whispered, She's losing them. And then a twist. A former campaign intern posted a 2022 video. In it, Omar sat at a donor dinner in San Francisco, sipping wine, laughing. Let them worry about the FEC, she said with a shrug. As long as the check's clear, I can keep pushing the agenda. The clip exploded across platforms. In the debate room, an aide handed Mamdani a tablet. He watched the video for 5 seconds, then calmly turned the screen to the moderator. Would you like to ask about this, he said, or should I? Omar's face fell. The moderator, shaken, asked, Congresswoman, is this authentic? Omar's lips moved, but no sound came. She shook her head slowly, not in denial, but surrender. Mamdani didn't gloat. He didn't grin. He simply said, leadership is telling the triumph even when it costs you. That's why I came tonight. And for the first time, Ilhan Omar lowered her head. 10 minutes before the debate's end, she quietly unhooked her mic. I'm done, she whispered to no one in particular. Then she stood, turned from the cameras, and walked out alone. Gasps, shock, stillness. The moderator looked at Mamdani, unsure what to say. Zohran stood slowly, adjusted his jacket, looked straight into the lens. This was never about defeating a person, he said. It's about reminding the people what truth looks like and what it costs to abandon it. No cheers, just the sound of a nation processing. Outside, crowds began chanting, not with rage, but unity. Truth matters. Truth matters. An elderly Somali woman holding an Ilhan for Peace sign whispered to a journalist, I never thought I'd say this, but tonight he was the one who honored us. Backstage, the news was already racing through Capitol Hill. Reporters shouted into phones. Staffers ran through corridors. Headlines flashed across every screen. Omar walks out, ethics probe looms. But Mamdani didn't stay to watch. He kept a promise and quietly visited a children's literacy center in D.C. No cameras, no fanfare, just crayons, wide eyes, and kids tugging on his sleeve. A nurse whispered to him, Whatever happened tonight, sir, you gave people something to believe in. At 2 a.m., thunder cracked over the Capitol. Inside, journalists watched lightning flicker across the dome. This city has never felt this awake, one muttered. Not for truth, not like this. Sunrise, Capitol Hill. Congresswoman Omar sat in her kitchen. Coffee cold, screen muted. Crawl text scrolled. House Ethics Committee to convene. Resignation possible. The TV showed clips of her children's science fair projects. Now in a segment titled, What Went Wrong? Tears slid down her face. At the White House, the president, not Trump in this version, but perhaps a fictional progressive president, met with Mamdani. No celebration, just reflection. Power blinds us, the president said quietly, but humility opens eyes. Tonight, you help this country see again. Back at the Capitol, Ethics Committee Chair Senator Landry opened the emergency hearing. This isn't about punishment, she said, it's about repair. On every desk, a confidential packet, evidence submitted by Mamdani's team. Outside, Omar waited behind the chamber doors. Her lawyer murmured, "You have one move left. Tell the truth." She nodded, heart pounding. Doors opened. She stepped forward. The room fell still. Then her voice, ragged but clear, "I failed the people who believed in me." Gasps rippled. Yes, the donations were real. Yes, I ignored the warnings. I chased influence over integrity. And I'm sorry. She looked to the gallery, her children, her husband. I have dishonored my own values. But tonight I reclaim one: accountability. She turned to Zohran Mamdani, seated beside the speaker. "Mr. Vice President, you gave me a gift I didn't deserve. The chance to be honest before it was too late." Zohran stood, hand on heart. He nodded once. No theatrics, just respect. Omar's final words echoed across history. "I hereby resign from the United States Congress, effective immediately." The chamber fell silent. Then it erupted, not in cheers, but in something deeper. Weeping applause. Senators embraced, aides cried, strangers online typed, "I'm sobbing." Outside, rain began to fall, soft, warm, almost cleansing. Across the nation, something shifted. Something long buried stirred back to life. Hope. Ilhan Omar didn't speak to reporters as she left the Capitol. Cameras flashed, aides flanked her like shadows, but no one said a word. No motorcade waited, no press conference, no polished statement. She simply walked down the marble steps into the quiet afternoon drizzle, head bowed. Inside, Zohran Mamdani stood by the chamber door, watching in silence, not with triumph, not with satisfaction, but with stillness, thoughtful, heavy. This hadn't been a political win, it had been a moral reckoning, and that came with weight. That evening, Zohran returned to his office. His wife, standing by the window with their baby on her hip, looked at him with tears in her eyes. "You didn't destroy her," she whispered. "You gave her the space to return to herself." He didn't answer. He just knelt, kissed his daughter's forehead, and said quietly, "This is what service is supposed to be." That night, he prayed longer than usual. And all across the country, left, right, undecided, Americans sat with their families and felt something rare settle inside them. Peace. In a small town near Minneapolis, Omar's home district, an elderly woman named Samira sat at her kitchen table, Quran open, tears sliding down her cheeks. She had voted for Ilhan twice, had believed, had prayed. Watching the resignation, she whispered, "Maybe truth still matters after all." In Atlanta, a teenager who never cared about politics posted a TikTok with Zohran's words over dramatic piano music. "Leadership is telling the truth, even when it costs you." By morning, it had 3.4 million likes. In a diner outside Des Moines, a retired bus driver bought breakfast for a single mom at the counter. "For Zohran," he said with a quiet smile. She nodded, eyes glassy. "For Zohran," she repeated. In Berkeley, a group of college activists gathered around a laptop, rewatching the debate. One of them, the one who always talked over everyone, whispered, "I don't agree with everything he stands for." But he meant every damn word. Zohran Mamdani hadn't just silenced a colleague. He reminded the country what honesty could look like, what integrity could feel like. And from grocery clerks to judges, nurses to artists, people cried. Not from grief, but from something closer to healing. The next morning, a plain envelope was slid under the vice president's office door. No letterhead, no seal, just a handwritten name, Ilhan Omar. Inside, a letter, uneven script on plain paper. "Mr. Vice President, thank you for giving me a chance to do the right thing. I've been afraid for too long, of losing power, of facing who I've become. But that night, your words freed me. My children hugged me for the first time in months without disappointment in their eyes. You didn't humiliate me. You gave me a way back to myself. I owe you more than an apology. I owe you my life back. Ilhan." Zohran stood for a long moment, holding the letter. Then carefully he folded it and placed it in the top drawer of his desk, not as a trophy, as a reminder. Sometimes true power isn't about being louder, it's about being real. By midday, the American flag above the Capitol fluttered gently in a calmer sky. News anchors didn't yell. Talk show hosts paused, overcome by emotion. One anchor on Good Morning America wiped her eyes and said, "It's been a long time since politics made me feel anything but rage." In classrooms, history teachers replayed the debate. In one high school in Missouri, a student raised her hand and asked, "Why don't more leaders speak like that?" Zohran didn't hold press conferences. He didn't celebrate. He reviewed legislation. He met with organizers. He prepared for his next town hall, not in a stadium or on a national tour, but in a church basement in D.C. No lights, no banners, just folding chairs, black coffee, and handwritten name tags. And across the country, people tuned in, not to watch a vice president, but to watch a man who reminded them of something they hadn't seen in a long, long time. Honor. They had never been to the White House. They didn't care much for politics, but they showed up for truth. Zohran Mamdani arrived without fanfare. No suit, just a rolled-up shirt and his wedding ring visible as he shook hands one by one. "Thanks for being here," he said again and again, like he meant it. No teleprompters, just questions. A factory worker stood and asked, "Sir, how did you stay so calm that night?" "She came at you hard." Zohran paused. "Because I wasn't defending myself," he said. "I was defending what my mother taught me. Do what's right, especially when it's hard." An elderly woman quietly wept in the second row. A boy, no older than 10, leaned toward his dad. "He talks like Grandpa." Another man stood. "How do we trust again after so much dirt?" Zohran nodded slowly. "We don't rebuild trust with speeches. We rebuild it by showing up, telling the truth, and staying when it gets ugly." No applause, just quiet, respectful, real. That same night, far away in a modest neighborhood outside Minneapolis, Ilhan Omar stood before the small home where she'd grown up. No cameras, no entourage, just a zip-on jacket against the cold, and her mother at the door. Her mother didn't say a word. She just pulled her into a hug and cried. Inside, they sat without talking. Omar stared at a framed photo of her father, long gone, wearing a knit hat and smiling at a community rally. "I disgraced the family," she whispered. "I let power turn me into something I wasn't." Her mother shook her head. "You didn't lose your soul, Ya Ilhan. You just forgot where you came from. But tonight you started to remember." Ilhan looked at her hands, still trembling. "Zohran didn't destroy me," she said. "He saved me from becoming someone I couldn't recognize anymore." That night, Ilhan Omar wrote a public letter. Honest, unfiltered, no spin. She admitted everything: the money, the fear, the pressure. She called for sweeping ethics reform, public campaign funding, and term limits. She ended with, "I failed this country, but Zohran Mamdani showed us redemption is still possible, even in Washington." The letter went viral, and for the first time in years, Americans cried not from outrage, but from forgiveness. The next morning, Zohran visited a public high school outside Baltimore. No media was invited. It had been on the calendar for months, long before the debate. But word had spread. The gym was full. No podium, just a stool, no speech, just questions. A girl stood up, voice shaking. "Mr. Vice President, do you ever feel scared?" Zohran smiled gently. "All the time," he said. "Growing up in a broken system, I was scared I'd never belong. And the night before that debate, I was scared I'd let my anger speak instead of my truth." A boy raised his hand. "How did you stay kind when they tried to make you angry?" Zohran looked him in the eyes. "Because real strength isn't loud. Real strength is kindness, especially when it's hard." The gym went still. Then one by one, students stood and clapped. Not because they were told to, but because they felt it. Later that night, Zohran returned to his office. On his desk sat a weathered envelope, no return address, the handwriting shaky. He opened it carefully. Inside was a short letter. "Mr. Mamdani, I'm 84 years old. I fought in Vietnam. I came back to a country that barely saw me. But when I saw you on that stage, calm, honest, steady, I cried. Not because you exposed someone, but because you reminded me of the kind of America I fought for." Thank you for speaking for those of us who don't have microphones. Private First Class William G. Daniels, retired. Zohran closed his eyes. A lump formed in his throat. He hadn't known his words would travel that far, but now he did. Standing at the window, looking out across Washington, he whispered, "Maybe this is why I was born." As the week ended, Zohran agreed to one final interview. No national spotlight. Just a local reporter from his days in the assembly, someone who'd known him before the title. The interview was simple, unscripted. "Mr. Vice President," Oshini asked, "when Congresswoman Omar challenged you, did you plan to take her down?" Zohran looked straight at her. "No," he said quietly. "I planned to remind her who she was before politics started speaking louder than purpose." "Then why that sentence?" she asked. "Why at that moment?" He leaned forward. "Because I saw myself in her. I know what it's like to feel angry and small, but when someone speaks truth into your darkness, it's like someone just lit a match in the tunnel." She wiped a tear. "Do you think America's healing?" Zohran smiled. "I don't know," he said, "but I think we're remembering what it feels like to care again." The interview aired that night, not because it was hyped, but because people shared it. And in those 10 minutes, Zohran Mamdani didn't look like a politician. He looked like the version of ourselves we'd almost forgotten was possible. The next morning, the Senate had opened as usual. But it wasn't usual. No grandstanding, no blame games, just a hum of quiet reflection. One by one, senators stood to speak, not about bills, not about parties, about truth. Senator Landry of Texas stood first. "I've been in this chamber for 22 years, she said, "and I've never seen what I saw that night." Then a Democrat from Vermont spoke. Zohran Mamdani didn't win a debate. He reopened a lost language, decency. Even a hardened party loyalist known for sparring with Mamdani's wings stood and said, "I didn't agree with his policies, but that man made me believe again, not in party, not in platform, but in character." No applause, no theatrics. They didn't need to. In the gallery above, Zohran sat silently, hands clasped, eyes full. And below, the seat once held by Ilhan Omar remained empty. Not in shame, but in tribute to the idea that even in Washington, redemption is still possible. That evening, back in Queens, Zohran tucked his son into bed. His phone buzzed, a voicemail, unknown number. He played it. "Mr. Mamdani, this is Ilhan Omar's father. I'm not a political man, never cared for the spotlight. But I watched your debate with my daughter and I wept. Not because she lost, but because you gave her a chance to stop pretending and start healing. You didn't treat her like a villain. You treated her like a human. You gave me my daughter back." Zohran Mamdani sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the dark screen of his phone. His son peeked up from the covers. "Baba, are you okay?" Zohran smiled faintly, placed a hand on his son's chest and whispered, "I think so, buddy." That night, he didn't post. He didn't write. He just sat quietly, letting the silence sink in, because he understood something. The true legacy of that one sentence wasn't political victory. It was redemption, and it was still unfolding. The next morning, his communications team didn't send out a press release. They posted a handwritten open letter addressed simply, "To every young American watching. You saw a leader fall, you saw another speak, but more importantly, you saw what happens when truth meets pride, and truth doesn't flinch. If you ever find yourself in power, remember what happened this week. Don't chase followers, chase integrity. Don't raise your voice, raise your values. You'll be told to fight dirty, to win at all costs. But the cost is too high if you lose your soul. Speak with honesty, serve with humility, and when the world is watching, be the kind of leader your children would be proud of." Zohran Mamdani, Vice President of the United States. The letter went viral. Teachers read it aloud at assemblies. Parents printed it and pinned it to fridges. In a school in Indiana, a civics class paused mid-lesson just to reflect on it. For the first time in years, American kids weren't idolizing pop stars or athletes. They were looking up to a man who told the truth and lived it. That evening, in a quiet chapel on the outskirts of D.C., Zohran knelt in the last pew. No cameras, no staff, just flickering candles and stillness. He prayed, not for himself, for the country. Keep me steady, keep me honest, help me stay small when the world wants me big. And if I ever forget the weight of that silence after I spoke, remind me what it cost. As he rose, someone outside lit a candle and left a note on the church steps. For the one who didn't shout, for the one who didn't run, for the one who reminded us what it means to be good. And in that quiet, sacred moment, Zohran felt something no title could give: purpose. That Friday evening, a summit was held at the Kennedy Center. The nation's top leaders and thinkers gathered. Zohran had been invited to speak. As the lights dimmed, the host stepped forward. "We had prepared a podium for the vice president," he said, "but he asked that we leave it empty." A soft gasp rippled through the crowd. Then the host read aloud from Zohran's written message. "Sometimes the most powerful thing a leader can do is step back. Let silence speak. Let others rise." This moment, this shift, doesn't belong to one man. It belongs to every American who still believes that truth can cut through noise. That dignity is stronger than rage. That even the powerful must kneel when faced with what's right. The spotlight lit the empty podium, and for almost a full minute, no one spoke, no one moved, because they didn't need to hear anything. They felt everything. In schools, hospitals, libraries, and even prisons, people quoted his now iconic line, "You want to talk about law? Then let's talk about the 4.2 million funneled through your education pack while you screamed about justice." But it wasn't the sentence itself that lived on. It was the tone, the truth, the choice not to humiliate, but to awaken. In a diner in Scranton, a waitress whispered, "He said what we've been screaming for years." In Texas, a single dad tattooed the phrase, "Truth doesn't shout," just above an old scar he used to hide. Across the country, the debate was no longer red versus blue. It was character versus cowardice. And Zohran Mamdani's name no longer belonged to a party. It belonged to a principle. Ilhan Omar, once broken by scandal, had begun traveling the country. Quietly, humbly. Speaking to young people about power, failure, and the long road back. At every stop, she said the same thing: Zohran Mamdani didn't defeat me. He freed me. Zohran kept showing up. Town halls, homeless shelters, schools, veterans centers. No cameras, no talking points, just truth. One night, while walking home after dinner with his wife, a man approached them. Ragged coat, homeless, shaking. "I watched that debate," he whispered. "You reminded me that I still matter." Zohran didn't speak. He just hugged the man, tightly. Because sometimes presence says more than words ever could. The next morning, a voicemail played on his phone. Unknown number. "Mr. Mamdani, I'm Ilhan Omar's father. I've never cared much for politics. I kept my distance from all this. But I watched you speak to my daughter that night, and I wept. Not because she lost, but because you gave her the permission to stop pretending and to start healing. You treated her like a human. You gave me my daughter back. If this story moved you, if it made you reflect, cry, or believe again, do three things. 1, comment one word below, truth. 2, like this post if your heart felt something real, and share it so someone else might remember that goodness still wins. You felt this story for a reason. Don't keep that feeling to yourself. Let's wake the world up together.